I will be talking more about some of the people, including my son, including Raman, including Frank, because these three people will be helping me in the presentation today. And it's like I say, it's a very full agenda presentation, so we need to make good use of every minute. In addition, I will be making some additional comments about Chris, because he made a presentation here which was very interesting and challenging. And even though he didn't think that justice was done to him, because he had challenged the heliocentricity that NASA believes in. And yet he did not convince the group, or something went wrong, like, that he did not win the $1,000. And yet now, as I look back at it, I realize that even though he did not convince the group that the universe is geocentric, and he didn't win the $1,000, he was on the right track. But he just didn't know why it is geocentric. I mean, he had reasons, but the reasons he had wouldn't even cut, force with NASA. And NASA considers itself the elite industry, elite in the knowledge of whatever doubts you may have about NASA or NASA may have about itself, but NASA has no doubt in their mind that, forgetting the universe as a whole because it's too big, nobody knows where the end is, but they are fully convinced that at least the solar system is heliocentric and not geocentric. But Chris's proposition was further that not only universe is geocentric, even the solar system is geocentric. So today, when we discuss simulation of the universe, I will convince you that regardless of how much respect you have for Chris or NASA or anyone else, you should at least remember, from my perspective, NASA is not at all unreasonable in coming to the conclusion that the solar system is heliocentric. And in fact, any intelligent person with a high IQ would come to that conclusion based on the information they had and observed, and also the information they just rejected outright. For example, they completely rejected the Bible, as if there is nothing worthwhile in the Bible. And because of that rejection, I will tell you how their own knowledge of the solar system and the universe misled them into thinking that the solar system is heliocentric, when in fact it is not. And the simulation project we are taking now is to really prove that NASA is 99.9% correct, but that very 0.1% where they went wrong, it made the big difference between heliocentricity versus geocentricity. Very, very, very tiny. It's like, you start on a train and you just have two tracks. One track deviates 1 degree from the other. And the train keeps going that 1 degree apart, and after 2,000 years, that 1 degree of difference ends up to be millions of miles, if not billions. And that's how a tiny mistake, a tiny difference has misled NASA into concluding. And yet, the things that they do still work. Why? Because they apply the corrections. And the corrections they learned not from their science, but from their engineering hat on. See, engineers have a great good habit of making things work. And they do it generally by trial and error. And that's another good example of engineers making things work and science taking the credit is the GPS. In the global positioning system, everybody knows it works. And the scientists claim, it's because of the Einstein's relativity that GPS works. But the reality is that the engineers that work on it, who are my friends, told me they ignore relativity altogether. They arrived at the correct GPS function by trial and error, by doing just the opposite of Einstein's relativity equations dictated they should do. Same thing with the particle accelerators and colliders. Einstein's special relativity says you should see mass increase. But the engineers who work in the colliders have told me that we don't pay any attention to Einstein. They say they have never, ever, under any circumstances, observed any mass increase in the particle accelerators and colliders. The reason science still keeps claiming that there is because of the energy they put in. And they say the energy that they put in must be going someplace. It can't go into nothing, so it must be going into the mass, and therefore mass must be increasing, and therefore they take it as a fact. But in reality, there is no such fact there. But if they keep teaching all the kids, the schools, the colleges, the professors, the tenureship, the DOE, where the funding comes from them, then there is nobody's interest to knock the apple cart. So they keep saying, in fact, the quantum physicist Richard Feynman, when he won his Nobel Prize, he was teaching PhD students about quantum physics. And his main premise there was, he would tell his PhD students, he says, listen, don't try to make any sense out of what I'm teaching you, because there is no sense in it. Just learn it, memorize it, regurgitate it on the exam, get yourself a nice house and a car, and make a decent living, and be happy, and be merry and all that. That's what he's telling his PhD students, either in private or in confidence or whatever. And it wasn't just one class or one student. He did it over a number of years. And this is after he won the Nobel Prize for it. Richard Feynman. You can always find more about him. But you may not find exactly the same way that I'm relating it to you, because I'm paraphrasing it quite a bit. The bottom line is this, that fact is stranger than fiction. But one reality is far, far more bizarre than any wildest imagination human being can come up with. Far more bizarre than what science considers fact. Far more bizarre that Richard Feynman said is bizarre, quantum physics. Far more bizarre than biologists say is bizarre, epigenetics. And none of those things make sense to biologists and geneticists. Even people like Richard Dawkins or Darwin, you know, and yet they keep believing in those things. These things, they say they are bizarre. They have written books about it, how bizarre quantum physics is, how bizarre epigenetics is. Nonetheless, it is also what they observe and they measure, and it is reality. And if reality can be so much more bizarre, then my challenge, working as a OneReality, is also equally bizarre. Maybe we should just turn off the projector for a while. Huh? Yeah, no, but that helps. Yeah, I can do that, but I mean, yeah. Anyway, we have a lot to do. I had to turn that thing off, and because I want to go into a segment now, before going into other, because I have so many things. To be honest with you, once I get going on this topic, I can keep talking for 10, 15, 20 hours. But you know, I don't intend to do that. That's why I want to make the best use of the time. I want you to experience something and get involved. More you get involved, the more you will remember some of the things I'm saying, even though they may not make any sense today. Someday they will. And I know that's true in my life. I've gone through so many experiences, many of them didn't make any sense. But as I make more and more and more progress towards OneReality, a lot of them falling into place. And one of the things I want to show you is that it is not something I take lightly. If you will excuse me, John, I want to move a little bit further back and want to point you to this. If you look at this table, there are about 50 volumes of 3-ring binders. On average, they are each 2 inches thick. And each one of those 50 volumes is full of my handwritten notes over the past 10 years or 12. And so a lot of effort has gone into it. So condensing that into a book is not an easy task. And the reason I want you to get involved is I want to hand out a few volumes to people, who are willing and interested in doing it, ready, willing and able to do it. I want to hand you a few of these volumes. I want you to peruse it while you get a chance, especially during the break. We will take a 10 or 15-minute break sooner or later. And then after we come back from the break, I want you to take 30 seconds, 40 seconds, 1 minute, even 2 minutes to just give the impression that you got while skimming through this volume. And it's just on a volunteer basis. So I'm beginning to start handing out some of these volumes, and maybe Raman or somebody can help me pass it, maybe Raman and Frank, and then finally, so maybe you can just start with one volume here and then pass it down. Maybe, here's another volume. This is kind of a small one. So, I'm just giving you a variety of it, you know what I mean? Let's see, what else can we pick? We can take this one, pass it on to whoever wants to. And somebody who doesn't want to do it, then they don't have to do it. This is also good because this is more current, 2012. This is probably good. This is about maths, a little different from physics. What else can I do? Probably, this is interesting. This is about mating, dating, and sex. Somebody, daring one, would listen to it and see if they can. So Frank can probably handle that because I've discussed with him a lot of those things about the SXP phenomena. Let's see, what else would you want to pick? Maybe illustrations because you work on the drawings and stuff like that. Will that help? Yeah, some of them you probably did them to begin with. Anybody else want a volume yet, or are we all set up? Ted or Raman, you probably need one, right? Huh? You are all set? You're not interested? Okay. Take your pick, you know what I mean. Yeah. The idea is to, pick one randomly. This may not be empty, I hope. No? Is it? What is it? Published. Oh, these are my previously published. That's a good idea because I want to show, I want to talk about the paper trail. And my son thinks that there is no paper trail and it's not that important. But I'm already creating paper trail. And if you go through these papers, you'll see that some of the things I'm talking today pertain to that paper. So these are already published. So they are not in my handwriting anymore because I've already translated to that extent. Okay, so now let's keep going, and so let's see what's next on this one also, because there's so many things to discuss and present, and one of the things I want to present is about mathematics, and maybe that will do when we come later to it. Maybe what we should do is do some of the little presentations and demos and stuff like that. While Frank will show you what he has been trying to do for the simulation. Not simulation, but some kind of a representation in a 3D CAD of the challenge of full 9 degrees of freedom of motion that it trickles down to the Earth from Virgo cluster to Milky Way to solar system to Earth. Okay, so why don't you take it away, and somebody, Raman, maybe you can help him. with the projector and I don't know if, yeah, okay. Do you need the mic again? I think it'll help because you're not as loudmouth as I am.
Along the way, I've been trying to picture a lot of images of what Powell's been talking about, a lot of these ideas, and I'm trying to put them into the my software here. I'm trying to draw these illustrations. These are not finished, but they are nonetheless images here of like the different balloons here. There's like a basketball, and then there's another ball here, tennis ball here. I'll have some illustrations of these.
Maybe I can take a minute and give you the little bit of a background. When I met with him, people always ask, "You want to show what?" Like, it's impossible. Are you crazy? And this is what I told him. I said, I want to show a ping pong ball which contains the entire solar system as well as the entire Milky Way, and it shows the relationship between the two being orthogonal. In other words, the Milky Way is on an axis perpendicular to the plane of the solar system. And that entire ball goes into the tennis ball, and the tennis ball contains not only the ping pong ball, therefore everything that's in the ping pong ball, but also the Virgo cluster, the Virgo supercluster, and all the stuff, at least to the known point of life. And then that is being in the tennis ball, and then the tennis ball goes into this basketball, such that and each one of them has 3 degrees of motion, and each one of them is orthogonal to the other. And each plane is perpendicular to the other 2 planes in each of the 3 orthogonal axes. So the bottom line is that you end up conveying 9 degrees of motion of the universe as a whole, which means which universe we don't even know where it ends. All we know is the observable unit so far. And I'll show you some videos and other stuff my son will show you. And then you will begin to get an idea of how comprehensive, how big the scale is. But whatever it is, even the universe, part of the universe that we have never observed is still in this basketball. And as that rotates, every motion of that goes to every motion in the tennis ball, which goes to every motion in the ping pong ball, which goes to the Milky Way galaxy, which then goes to the solar system, which then goes to the Earth, in addition to the diurnal motion and others. So Earth has 3 degrees of motion almost on its own within the solar system. The orbital motion, the diurnal motion, and so on. But the total motions that you don't notice because they're kind of fed back through the globe is 9 motions. And it is because of those 9 motions that the people in Australia and the people in America both feel they're upside up, right side up. It's not like, we are seeing that, our feet are to the ground and they are upside down from our, if you look at the globe, they would look like upside down, that their feet are hanging to the ceiling because their ceiling is the floor for them. And yet they don't fall. And they probably wonder the same thing because they feel right side up. They say, why aren't Americans falling off the globe? It's because of that gravity created by 9 degrees of motion. And that may be impossible to simulate because, God is God. He can do what he wants to do. He has a way of doing it. But can man do what God did? I have talked to scientists of both colors. Those who say it cannot be done because nobody knows how the universe works, they don't acknowledge that there is a first time for everything. And then I have always talked to other computer scientists. He says, what are you crazy? You can program anything. You can program anything. So they're saying everything can be programmed, regardless, And so I don't know, who is right, where the truth lies in between. If it cannot be done, I won't be disappointed because there are other ways to communicate. After all, I communicated to some degree of communication that Frank is able to make and start showing you what he's going to show you next. But after showing you that, we'll show you some other things that NASA and even designers of the games have come up with, which all indicate that yes, it may indeed be possible, even if it is not possible within my budget. But I need to know the answer to the both questions. Can it be done? And secondly, if it can be done, can it be done affordably? Because I'm not NASA. I don't have $1 billion to spend on it, So all those things keep in mind. Sorry for the interruption, but I thought it might help you to know what he started from. He was probably as confused, even though he's a professional. He was probably as confused as you are probably now. He says, what the hell is he talking about? Has he lost his marbles? But as time goes on, not only I have developed more confidence in myself, because at first time I was just as skeptical as any of you. I mean, I just found it hard to believe some of the things I was finding to be correct. I mean, one of the hardest things I found was that 0 and infinity are synonyms. Now, that's nothing in our experience in the universe leads us to that kind of a conclusion. If anything, it leads us to just the opposite conclusion, that 0 is on the one end of the number line, infinity on the other end of the number line. The two shall never meet, let alone the likelihood of them ever being equal. I, in fact, made 5 mathematical proofs of proving 0 and infinity are synonyms. 3 of those proofs apply to any mathematics. You take any book on mathematics from grade school to PhD mathematics, and those 3 proofs apply and they can see. But the additional 2 proofs apply only if you recognize that there are 2 kinds of zeros and 2 kinds of infinity. The 2 kinds of zeros are relative 0 and absolute 0. And 2 kinds of infinity are relative infinity and absolute infinity. So all 5 proofs apply to both relative and 0. But 2 of them only apply to absolute 0 and absolute infinity for proving that they are synonyms. In fact, when I told this to my son, John, he said, "Pal, Dad, your biggest problem is going to be not proving that the relative 0 and relative infinity could be equal, but the fact that you won't be able to convince them that there are 2 kinds of 0, relative and absolute, and 2 kinds of infinities, relative and absolute." I said, well, I'll cross that bridge when I come to it. But in the meantime, I am getting way off to topic. Oh yeah, well, no, I understand. I ramble a little bit, but you know it is necessary because once you get going on a thread, you need to continue. He's my MC and moderator. He's giving me a signal. He says I'm going way off on topic. Well, I'll give you credit for that. Yeah, you should use a big one of my big pens like I have on the flip chart. Otherwise, I can't read it. You know. Thank you very much. The point well taken. I do have a habit, by the way, of getting carried away. But anyway, this tennis, the ping pong ball with both solar system and Milky Way, and the tennis ball with additionally the Virgo cluster and the super cluster, and then everything else in the basketball with all the known universe as well as the unknown and unobserved universe, and all of them are moving. Again, when we come to this thing, how NASA got confused, we'll talk more about it. But then John may still give me a signal, you're going off the topic again. Because it's hard to relate everything from different directions. None of them look connected until you see the connections, and you have to see enough pieces to see the connection. Because one piece does not make a whole. So you need to all of them. In fact, one of my more modern favorite saying is, that if you think you can solve the problems of science without solving the problems of religion, or vice versa, you are fooling yourself. The only reason I am making some progress is because I am seeing errors not just in science, but also in religion. Yes, sir?
Problems of or problem of?
Problems. Plural. Did I say singular?
No,
There is more.
I wasn't quite sure which one you said.
No, I meant plural. Because if you look at religion, forget science, within religion, the problems is such a big plural that you wouldn't believe. And I think same is true within sciences, whether it's physics, chemistry, mathematics, everything. They don't agree with each other. And even when they agree to some point, there are big disagreements begin to develop. In fact, I belong to an organization called Natural Philosophy Alliance. They're basically physicists, because that's the term Newton used when he was a physicist, when he was doing science. So they disagreed with the mainstream. They see there's something wrong with relativity, there's something wrong with quantum physics, there's something wrong with fields, there's something wrong with space-time fabric, but they can't correct it. And unless you can correct it, you really are wasting your time too. So anyway, I'll put this away, talk about that again. A lot of people intuitively think the center of a sphere is the center of the diameter. That is not correct. That's not how God saw it. According to God, the center of the universe is the center of the radius, not the center of the diameter. But in this universe that's so big, who can tell the difference between center of the diameter and the center of the radius, which is only off by a factor of 2, when the whole thing is 80 orders of magnitude. That's 10, 1 followed by 80 zeros. And that's not volume, that's just, surface area. And radius and diameter are less, and volume, of course, is that much more. But nonetheless, just keep that in mind. Multiplying and dividing thing by half doesn't do much to the universe, because the universe, from the smallest to the largest, and I will talk about that also later on, he's now talking about the larger part. And later on, I think Frank also has some instructions from me to try and do something similar for the small part of it, which is going below the subatomic, below, way, 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 way below nanotechnology. And even nanotechnology is hurting some heads in the scientists and engineering brains. But I'm talking about, they haven't even scratched the surface yet. Just as they haven't gone, anywhere near close to the edge of the universe. I mean, not going there, but I mean, just determining, either mathematically or by telescopes or whatever methods, they don't know where the edge of the universe is. Anyway, back to you, Frank.
So basically, I'm trying to make a Milky Way galaxy, and there's a solar system that's not really at scale because I'm not trying to put the scales together. I draw them and try to put them together. This is a fit anyway. And basically there was my Milky Way galaxy I'm trying to show. It's kind of like a cartoon image of what the middle of the picture in the middle of the galaxy, kind of like a big glow. When you see pictures of it, it glows, and the rest of it is like offshoots. And a lot of galaxies are like spiral shaped and everything else. And this is my attempt to show the solar system at like a 90-degree angle to the Milky Way galaxy itself. So basically that's it. That's really just my my ongoing work on this. There's just so much to it. But just picture the size of the just our solar system and the size of our galaxy, and it's said that there's billions of galaxies. It's just unfathomable to try to imagine that the universe is that big. But basically, those are just the illustrations that I have. It's not really finished yet. There are other illustrations that maybe to show later on that kind of put this a little bit more in perspective. And so that's really all that I really have.
Good. Maybe we can supplement this now with some of the websites or the DVD or anything that you think is more convenient to go on to.
DVD is probably the most.
Okay. Yeah, because that'll give you some time to.
You've got the disc?
Disc should. I think it might be in your computer.
No?
No? You took it out? If it's not, then it must be in the jacket, and the jacket should be here someplace too. Is there anything in your computer?
No.
Nothing. Oh, okay. So I don't know. All I remember is that I gave it to you. And do you see anything sitting there on the table, or? No, I don't see it here. I wouldn't take it downstairs. Maybe we'll go to some websites before we, by the time we locate that. It could be on the desk where you are. I don't know. Because like I say, I had no reason to remove the disc jacket. And there were 2 discs in it, and it was disc number 2, I think, you were going to focus on. Let me see.
This one or
Let me see if I can find.
this is Atlas of the Universe, which
Can you figure out what this is? Open it and figure it out. It's something we might want to show.
nearest
You want
closest star
scissors?
is only 7,000 times further than the edge of our solar system. This map
Excuse me.
shows all the stellar systems that lie within 12.5
Here,
light
scissors.
years from us. You can see here. There's a sphere of 10 light years, and then we're going to zoom out 20 times. You look at the 200 different light years of our solar neighborhood. Look, let's do that one time. Then 20 times again. There's 5,000 light years from the Orion Arm. 5,000 light years in the Milky Way galaxy. And this is the 500,000 light years of the satellite galaxy, which is the Milky Way there. 5 million light years of a local group of galaxies. Milky Way is progressively getting smaller. Here's the 100 million light years of Proto supercluster. Further visible there, the Milky Way is no longer visible. And here you can just see the superclusters. There's a supercluster there.
See, that's the 1 billion light years, just less than a centimeter. Now, can you take them back to Earth? because we hate to fall from that height. I mean, keep going in the reverse direction.
This is the first page again.
Oh, you were supposed to go gradually, like you went up gradually, so that people get the feel for it, you know, in both directions. Start from this and then go zoom by zoom each stage.
Now we're zooming back in all the same stages. 1 billion light years from neighboring superclusters. 100 billion light years of the Virgo supercluster. They're visible there. Venus within 5 billion light years of the local group of galaxies. Milky Way there. Universe within 500,000 light years of the satellite galaxies. Their Milky Way is easily visible at this scale now. Universe within 50,000 light years of the Milky Way galaxy. The sun's location now possible to point out. Universe within 5,000 light years of the Orion Arm. Universe between 50 light years of our solar neighbor. See the sun right there. Universe within 12.5 light years of the nearest stars. The sun is centered here. Is visible.
So where's the Earth?
Earth is not visible at this
So yes, thank you. You also had another website or the game?
You want to see that one?
Yeah, either the game or the website, either one. I think your game was more intriguing to me. This is to answer the question whether or not it's feasible to do something like this. This is something the game designers have done already. So you know that much is feasible.
And this is our solar system. Planets on that right there, the centered bulge in the galaxy. This is just showing the degrees of freedom you could have, zoom in and out, and just.
And also some measure of the angle you can eyeball between the plane of the Milky Way and the plane of the solar system. I mean, this is not an exact, you know, measurement, but it gives you a feel for it that there is a substantial angle.
Yeah, which nobody's debating as far as I know.
Okay.
See, the animation is there, but the physics engines for the computers exist that this much modeling is easy.
What's not easy is getting the feedback. We're not interested in summation of 9 degrees of freedom. We are interested in integration of 9 degrees of freedom, just as positive and negative feedback in an amplifier or an oscillator.
You can see, just the modeling, you can see the slow turn of the galaxies here. But this is all to scale, so scale it set to in the settings here. And it can be adjusted, but I'm not sure if it's visible to the crowd. It might be, see if the galaxy is indeed turning.
Maybe if I turn this dark a little bit, it might be better.
So the turning galaxy, the computers can do the modeling for large portions of the universe fairly easily these days. Is the point we're trying to make. This is, you know, just the Milky Way galaxy, but you can zoom in on various stars, and then you can change their properties as well. Orbital elements. It just, the technology is easily there.
So was there another website or, okay, we'll do that too, and then maybe somehow we can,
NASA video.
yeah, if we can find it.
Right there.
Wasn't the video in your NASA.
Yes. It actually can be simulated in that game I was just in. Not a 100% sure what this video is supposed to portray other than where in the Milky Way galaxy the sun is. And the last one is this one. We'll save for later, right?
Yeah, that's the binary star. Now maybe we should talk about that. Look at this one, because I want to talk about it next. I didn't realize that's the one this was. Otherwise I would have set up the stage for it. Because this really goes to one of the crux of the story of the simulation of the universe. Binary star, keep that in mind. Because that's what NASA knows for a fact. And it's a fact. I'm not, this is not from his game. This is not from a game, people. This is from NASA type
This
people.
one's not from NASA.
But somebody like NASA. It's somebody that is not a game designer.
If you were to call the circus like NASA, yes.
Huh?
If you're going to call the circus like NASA, then yes.
Why not? Why wouldn't you? I don't know what they do. But anyway, watch these, how both stars are justified in seeing that they are the center and the other star is going around them. So depending upon where the people are. If there are people only in one star, then they're the center, because there are no people on the other one to dispute that. The only time the dispute comes up is when there are people on both and each is seeing them as the center and the other star going around them, because they don't see this motion of their own star on which they are, and that causes the conflict. And that's where NASA went wrong, because NASA did not want to believe that God would design Earth and the sun in such a way that they move like a binary star pair, for many reasons. But the biggest one in their mind was that Earth is not a star. So that connection was impossible in their mind. Another connection that was difficult for them was that the binary stars are almost equal in size, or maybe one is 10 times bigger than the other. In those scales, 10 or 20 or 100 times bigger is considered equal. But when you look at the sun and the earth, we're not talking about 10 or 100 time difference. We're talking about thousands of times of difference. And that's hard to connect, because the common center of the two masses in the binary star is outside of both stars. But the common center of the sun and the earth is pretty much in the same spot where the common center of the sun is. So the common center of the earth and the sun is very nearly the same as the common center of the sun itself. So what happens is, and there are no people on sun. We are the only people on earth. So we are entitled to think that we are the center and the sun is going around it, even though we are both moving. We are both moving like binary star. The only reason that makes us geocentric is because our planet, the center of our planet, is anchored to the surface of the mid-sphere that I think Frank tried to show in the middle. It's a sphere. I mean, he was only showing you two-dimensional aspect. It's like a sphere within a sphere within a sphere within a sphere. But this was the mid-sphere. And the center of the earth is always gliding on that surface, even when it is experiencing all 9 degrees of motion. So anyway, again, there are many other reasons, but you can see why NASA is not at fault. All they do is they just make the corrections. And the corrections come from, if you compare the solar day with sidereal day, there is a difference of a few minutes of, and if you take the same ratio, you will find it's the same ratio between the volume of the sun and the volume of the earth, or maybe the surface area of the sun and the surface area of the earth. I'm not so sure. Or maybe, for all I know, the mass of the sun versus mass of all of the planets combined together. It is still thousands of times. A sun is at least 1,000 times bigger than even the giant planet like Jupiter. So that's it for now. So maybe pretty soon we need to take a break and see if we can find that video, and then in the meantime it'll give you a little time to peruse through your thing. And Raman, I think, opened Just Package, and maybe he'll tell us if there is anything we can do that might be worth the interest of the group. Basically, it's a 3D screensaver. My son is very skeptical of it. He says a screensaver, all they do is just add viruses. So, and he doesn't want, he says, if you mess up your computer again, and of course this time it's his computer, he says he wouldn't help me again. He has been my savior, by the way. I have gone through so much hell with both the computers, my domain, and my, what's the third thing? Telephones. All three went down within 2 weeks of each other, but now they're all coming back, and I will talk a little bit about that, so you can go and you will start building it up quite fast now, because I was just handicapped. I couldn't do it because I just didn't have a good starting point until my savior came. So he's got me started now. In fact, he will even show you the 2 websites so that you know they really do exist, and he will take you there in real time. If you, do you want to see it now, or can we do that later? Again?
At the end.
At the end, yeah. We'll do that at the end because that's trivial. Okay, so let's take a break, get a cup of coffee, eat something. Let's get started.
Described it versus the way they did.
I know, I have expanded it. You know, normal sleep and dream has only 5 stages. You know, REM sleep and the 4 stages that go underneath it, you know. That's all they know about. I have expanded it to 14. So that's almost triple. In my graphic, it shows not just the 5 stages of sleep and dream, but 14 stages. Of course, I did go from birth to death and even beyond. I include the stages such as the coma on life support patient. I include abortion. I include OBE experiences, out-of-body experiences that the doctors and surgeons have experienced, and they find it just as bizarre as quantum physics, as epigenetics. That's another thing to add to my bizarre experiences. The medical doctors and surgeons have no good explanation of how a patient who claims he died, he went up, he walked on the roof, he did some other things, some walked in through the tunnel, they met a being of light, they came back, and they described to a T what the surgeon did. That he left a cotton swab in his stomach, that he left one time a scissors, one time a patient was hovering around the ceiling, and she found a tennis shoe. And when she came back, and this was a hospital floor, I mean hospital roof. And when the surgeons and everybody questioned, we don't believe you, how could you see it, this and that and that? Eventually she said, well, if you go upstairs, you will find left foot of the sneakers of certain size on so and so place on the roof. And they went and they found it. And they still didn't want to believe that there is any such thing as out-of-body experience. I don't know how much proof people need. For me, that was enough. And then there are dozens of books written about it. One famous book is from that doctor, I don't know whose name I forget. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, when I was involved in this.
Basically, I said talk about handwritten notes. I've been publishing some stuff, and these are all published articles in not in the mainstream science, but at least the level below it. So I'm creating little by little trail anyways, but there's nothing like a cogent one book, you know what I mean? And that's what my next goal is before I die, to create that book and leave it there. So yeah, that's all it is. There's really not much for you to say then. This is a sample of the paper trail of the handwritten notes that have gotten this. But it is true that there are 7 billion perceptions of reality. That's because everybody perceives reality a little different. And as far as that person is concerned, it is their reality. I mean, I go for a morning walk, and there's a park in the Shelton, and there's this graffiti. And I occasionally indulge, stop and read it. And one of them said something like, time out, fuck God. You know, I mean, things like, which can be. And I took a picture of it, and there were 2 or 3 of them, try the apple, love Eve. Adam, try the apple, love Eve. Things like that. So I took a picture of it thinking that I would use it in my book someday to show that even though it's not reality, it is somebody's reality. Because every time Shelton cleans up that graffiti and paints over it, somebody comes up with something even worse.
I'm not sure if you recall, but that wall was actually put there specifically for the purpose of graffiti.
No, I don't know that. If that were true, why would they? It wasn't a wall, it's the pillars of the bridge. I'm going under the bridge.
There's a wall in the park specifically for graffiti.
That I don't know. I've not seen any graffiti on the wall. I'm seeing graffiti either on the bridge thing or on the Veterans Memorial, which is the returned veterans. They should be honored even more rather than trying to corrupt it. Anyway, let's go to Chris quickly. I think, Chris, you probably have a better memory, which I tried to explain a little bit in the beginning as to what your presentation was about, what my paraphrase of it was, where do we stand on it now, and whatever thoughts you have, bring them up to date. What happened? Because most of these people weren't there at that meeting. And if I remember correctly, the moderator that day was Manny Ratafia, and he returned my $1,000 check instead of giving it to him, because somehow Manny Ratafia said, no, this is no different than claiming that you are a member of the Flat Earth Society.
Of the what?
Flat Earth Society. He says, believing in geocentric society is as bad as believing in Flat Earth Society. But of course he was wrong. Okay, you give your analysis of it.
Like I said, I'm a chemistry graduate, and I always had a fascination for science. What I found was that everything was going very well until the time of 20th century. Starting in 1900, first Einstein's special theory of relativity came out in
1905, yeah.
He was trying to say that we can have an improvement over Newton, but saying that Newton is wrong, which is something I could never understand or appreciate, because no other science does that. They all build up, like Newton himself said, he's standing on the shoulders of giants, like Galileo and Kepler and Copernicus. So, evolution of science should be in the sense that you take the strong point and then build from there, and Newton's laws are called Newton's laws. So relativity is called a theory. There's a big difference between a law and theory. Theory is always testable. It may still be criticized, but laws have already passed that stage, and they are accepted as universal laws. So that is where I started thinking, and then of course I had the fortune to meet Mr. Alasija at one of the conferences. He was one of those people who I saw directly thinking outside the box, no barriers, and that's exactly what I had in my mind too. But as far as the geocentric system, the simple fact is that at that time it was not known. There was life only on Earth, at least in the solar system. So the observer is here. So we have to take a stand and say, okay, I'm going to say.
What the picture on the computer, on the screen, maybe turn this on or whatever the problem is. I want to talk a little bit about it before going to, maybe after this, maybe I will show you the God's number. Epson. I don't know what key you pressed to transfer from there to here. Or maybe it's already there. Yeah, it's already there. Okay. No, there was another slide before that, wasn't there? I thought I was looking at a slide about universal URL. What was that one? There was a slide here before which said something about not mysteries of mathematics, but about universal relationship law.
Could be somewhere one of the slides.
Could be? Yeah, let's go to see if there is another one called universal relationship law. No, that was a title slide, I thought. Oh, keep going, maybe there was. But that's what I wanted to mention. This is about Newton also, Einstein. See if there is a slide about universal. Yeah, there it is. And keep going, maybe. This is also good. And let me just quickly say a few words because it just came up naturally. Universal relationship law is one of the first law I discovered which put me in this journey and search for OneReality. And the only other thing that I did before that was what I call universe within universe. And that simply meant that there is a FTPRDN ABU within IEVACX FFU. And these acronyms stand for specific attributes of the both universe. And the IEVACX FFU fully contains FTBR and ABU universe in which we live, to which we are confined. And I mentioned that to John the other day. I said, if we believe that if you are confined to the universe we live in, and he thought it was funny. He says, what else can there be? But that's what I was referring to, that in addition to this universe we are confined to, there is another universe called IEVACX FFU. I didn't have a time to prepare the flip chart for that, but I have it memorized, so I don't even have to think about it. I know every letter of the acronym is a major attribute of each of the two universes. Anyway, so let's close this now, because there's lots of slides. Each one will take 10, 15, 20 minutes to talk about. So, but I just want to get, every one of them is also controversial, by the way. And in fact, more you look at it, more you will say that you're convinced that I'm a crackpot. So,
What is V sub n?
what sub n? Oh, V sub n is the natural nominal velocity of the Earth. Because Earth is moving, in addition, the integrated 9 degrees of freedom, as the astronomers observe it, they observe it as 370 kilometers per second from the direction of Aquarius to Leo. Constellation Aquarius to Leo is moving 370 kilometers per second, but it's actually a little more. It's 370.37 kilometers per second through the, but they don't know about the 37. But I mean, I came across so many other exact numbers just from the signature of God and the number of God, because so many of the numbers that click in my mind come from that number of God, just like your social security number. So let's go and start looking at some of those. You can turn this off now, and I'm going over to the other side.
One thought that actually quickly interested me is how much does the universe weigh? I'm assuming that there was a typo, or you meant how much is the mass of the universe?
No, we're talking about if the universe were on Earth, how much would it weigh? But if you take it to some other planet or something, it doesn't change very much. Because we're talking about 10 raised to the power 100 grams. You know what I mean? So the fact that you take it to Jupiter is not going to affect it from 10 raised to the 100 to 101 or 99. It will only affect it by a quotient varying between 1 and 9.
Right, point made.
Okay, thank you. Many times I have trouble making point with you because you're my son and he keeps me really run for my money.
Right, I just said that I understood what you were attempting to say.
Yeah. Okay, I want to show you this now. Okay, so let's see where we can go from here, and then I want to go to the right. I'm going to reveal to you now the serial number or social security number of God. This is it, okay? I've broken it down into two parts first, so that I form a basis for explaining to you why is 0 missing and what does the line mean. Think of this as an integer. And if you add 0 in front of it, or it doesn't matter how many zeros you add in front of it, it doesn't change the value of that number. All it does is it it just doesn't change the value at all. On the other hand, if you were to start adding 0 after 9, it doesn't change it much except it multiplies God's serial number by 10. But if his number is infinite anyways, multiplication by 10 means nothing. Same thing with the fractional part. Here, if you add zeros, it means nothing because the number is still the same, the value doesn't change. But if you start adding zeros between the decimal and the 1, each one divides it by a factor of 10. So keep that in mind, that the reason 0 does not appear in this base 10 system is because the only thing zeros does is on one end it has no effect, and the other hand either it divides by 10 or multiplies by 10. Now if you're not familiar with what the underline means, the underline basically means, but the overline simply means you take the whole set and you repeat it. You take the whole set and put it in front of it and repeat it. Put it in front of it, repeat it. Put it in front of it, repeat it. Ad infinitum till you die. And the same thing then you turn on this end and you take this set of numbers after the decimal and repeat it after 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 9. And repeat it, repeat it, repeat it, repeat it till you drop dead. And you will still never come to an end. And that is God's serial number. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, recurring point, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, recurring ad infinitum in each direction. Ad infinitum in each direction. And how do I know this is his number? Because this number and its derivatives, like the one I mentioned you, like he asked, how do I know the speed is 370.37 and not what the mainstream claims? Because they have never claimed it to that accuracy before. Because that's the number, that's a derivative from this number. So many of the numbers that are Earth has, the universe has, the entropy has, the constants of nature have, and many of the constants of nature, by the way, published in the physics books are wrong because they have no bearing to his signature of God. 13.7 billion, by the way, does have a signature of God in this number. The only problem is that on Earth we can't agree what billion means. See, the British billion is 10 raised to the power 12. The American billion is 10 raised to the power 9. And yet, every place I go to the conferences, they say Big Bang happened 13.7 billion years ago. And the question is, whose billion? American billion or British billion? French billion or, Mexican billion or what? You know what I mean? So God said, listen, I'm not going to play favorites between Americans and British. They're all my children. I love them all. So I'm going to choose my own billion. And he chose the signature of Big Bang, if there is any truth to it at all, which I'm not fully convinced either, one way or the other. That 13.7 billion signature is 13.7 times 10 raised to the power 10, which is neither the American billion, 10 raised to the power 9, nor the British billion, which is 10 raised to the power 12. And God is staying out of that fight between British and Americans as to Big Bang upper 13.7 billion. Who's 13.7 billion? Okay? And that's a very simple logic that I think even a 5th grade math student can understand. How can Big Bang be 13.7 billion years old when we don't know what the billion is in America and in England? Yes, sir.
That's why we have GY
GY, yeah.
Kitty year.
Right. Which is what they don't use. Because everybody's conferences I go to,
That's what's in the literature.
it is.
Serious
Well,
literature, it's GY.
okay. Which is what, 10 to the power 12?
Well,
Or
I think
9?
it's 10 to the 9th.
10 to the 9th. Yeah, which is the American billion.
Thousand
Yeah, yeah.
mega.
Yeah, yeah. And when we use that, there is no confusion. But the thing is, 13.7 billion years appears all over the literature also. If you have never come across it, I will give you references. I mean, you'll find it in National Geographic. You will. I mean, I have some expensive.
National Geographic can hardly be considered that scholarly anymore.
Well, I don't care. But this is what they are communicating to people like me and general public.
Well, general public, this is
Okay, general public reads National Geographic, not the annals of physics.
How is this stated in the popular literature in Britain?
How is it stated there? They say it
age of
giga-
the universe.
Huh?
In the United States,
Yeah,
it's
4 billion or
general public
something.
is universally 13.7 billion years.
Right.
How is it stated to the
In England.
general populace in the United Kingdom?
Right. But how is it done it in England?
That's what I'm asking.
I don't know, but I'm saying I have heard the 13.7 billion both in America and in England. I mean, at least at the National Geographic level. And I'm not talking about ordinary publication. I'm talking about publications of National Geographic for which I had to pay over $50. It's not like a paperback cheap to make a buck or something. They're proud of the research that they do before they publish anything like that. Even if you think, they are no authority on science, they do have scientists on their review. Anyway, that's besides the point. Now I want to go to Frank. I mean, again, there's more points I want to make, but we don't want to belabor it because we have so many other things to talk about before the pizza arrives. Because once the pizza arrives, then maybe people will lose interest in listening to me. So I want to keep waiting. Fair enough, right? Frank, I wanted to come to you. What was it? I wanted to ask you, because I don't really have enough time to demonstrate to you, in other words, how God can be so responsible that He can give you the freedom to do what you want, and yet at the same time achieve the result that is best for you, and He knows what's best for you. Long before you make your decisions. Okay? So only thing is that He makes like a computer chess game. You make a move and the computer makes a move, but you don't know how the computer made his move or etc. It just shows up as a move, just like the Jeopardy. There are two players playing, Ken Jennings and one other one, and then there is a third one, is an empty spot with a computer IBM called Watson. And his answers show up, and he ends up winning the Jeopardy game. And it's all because there is an alternating arrangement of moves. And I was trying to explain this concept to Frank. And since I don't have the time here, I gave him a little demonstration of, okay, you pick a number, and I will write the sum of all those numbers at the bottom. The only thing I ask is that every time you write a number, you give me a chance to write another number. And you write another, I write another. You write another, I write another. You write another, I write another. And of course, I have already written the total long time ago, before he even wrote his first number, and I made a compensating number for it. And that number is written there. And he was going through it and writing, and I was writing, he was writing, I was writing, and then he took the numbers on the board because I had put the total already, because that's the purpose that God is trying to achieve for that total. And I gave him a calculator and asked him to total it up, and then he will tell you a little bit maybe more precisely what he did. Go ahead.
In 1975, Chancellor Dennis Healy of the United Kingdom announced that their treasury would adopt the U.S. billion thenceforth.
Yeah.
The British billion was abolished in 1975.
Oh, good.
So
The-
there goes your question.
Okay, thank you. But that means the Big Bang is altogether wrong. Because I was just giving them a benefit of doubt that if there is a signature of 13.7 billion and they can't agree on 9 and 12, but it's wrong. We know either way it's wrong. 9 is wrong, 12 is wrong. The signature is on 13.7 times 10 to the power 10. And I don't think neither British nor Americans have a rationalization for that the age of the Big Bang, or for that age of the universe. So I take it back. I think they're more, if I can use a more polite language, they're more fucked up than I thought they were. The Big Bang is more fucked up than I thought Big Bang is fucked up. I was just giving them the benefit of doubt. That's okay. I mean, how did it come out to be that total, which is what God wanted it to be? In other words, God has already decided what your best potential is. And every time you make a good decision or a bad decision, He makes a counter move to adjust for it to make sure that you are still being optimized. Either you are becoming slightly better or slightly less worse off. And that's up to you because you make good decision, bad. Every time you make a bad decision, He has to adjust too. Every time you make a good decision, He adjusts too, you know, to bring to your full potential. But every time you make a bad decision, He wants to make sure you don't slide all the way down to hell. So he gives you two more choices, one equally plausible, so that you could go either way. You could make, after making a bad choice, you could make a better, good choice after the first wrong choice as a pair. Because every time the choice God presents you is one is slightly better than the other. And you are capable of both. And God is hoping that you would make the slightly better choice. But if you make the bad choice, He will still give you two more choices, so that you can reverse the path of decline to the path of uprise. But either way, He will make sure that you become the best you can be, considering the choices you made. So your choices, you're accountable for the choices you make. And God is making sure that based on those choices, He wants to make sure that you get the best deal that you can from those bad choices or good choices.
How do we know that?
That's another subject that we have to discuss with illustrations, and that's why OneReality is highly dependent upon not just words but also visuals. And I do have lots of visuals, but even though today we didn't have a chance to get into many. But the mathematics that I showed him is just a one step that gives Frank at least a confidence that there is a possibility I might be right.
And those visuals, if any luck, will be on the website shortly.
How do you know? Oh, you will put it. Yeah, and maybe I'll do it with you. And I would have done it today if we had more time. But it's already 5:15, and my daughter says that she'll go and pick up the pizza around that time. So, pizza might be here by 5:30. And I don't want it to get cold, So, there's a lot more to talk. I mean, maybe now is a good time to tell them that both websites are operational.
Oh, yeah.
You show them, and we'll still could, huh?
There's nothing but the one page there.
Oh, no, it's just the fact that it is, that they can send me an email there.
No, they can't.
Huh?
Well, I mean, they could, but
You said they can. If they can send me email on those two websites, that's good enough. Or using their own browser if they can send me email at that web domain. Okay?
yeah, pilot.com is existing again. And the
OneReality.com.
info.
That should be .info.
And there's also one
I mean, we have to start loading it now. But we have lots of good information. I have, of course, a lot more for ourpal.com for intellectual property than I have for OneReality. But I think OneReality will build fast because I will be taking the most important nuggets of wisdom. You know, I have these 4 classifications of attention getters. First level is what I call sound bites. Not the way press spells it as B-I-T-E-S. I spell it sound bites with B-Y-T-E-S because we are in the digital age and all my sound bites are digital sound bites, so to speak. So I'm coming up and I'm disagreeing with the mainstream media and changing the spelling. So you will see maybe, I don't know if I have it, I don't think I have here anymore. But this is these are the 2 email addresses, one from each website. pal@ourpal.com and info@onereality.info. This email comes to me, this email comes to me, and link from one to the other will take you from one website to the other. So, and you will see a lot more stuff. But the first 4 things I want to put on it, these 4 headings. One I call sound bites. These are just sound bites like the journalism sound bites. If I can give you an example or 2, is light has no need to travel in the absence of a medium. So all this nonsense about speed of light limitation, well, if the light has no need to travel when there is no medium, then it doesn't matter what you think the limitation God put on man to not exceed certain speed. Granted, you and I cannot exceed speed of C, but we are very more physical than positrons and electrons, or hadrons for that matter, in particle accelerators and colliders. They have so much smaller mass that it's not like launching Space Shuttle or Sputnik or Empire State Building and sending it to the moon. No, they're talking about extremely light particles and accelerating them to almost the speed of light, never to the speed of light. And again, that's just one sound bite I say mainstream will never encompass, because to them this thought is very repugnant, because I'm saying, hey, nothing travels at speed of light, not even light. So that's the sound bite. Nothing travels at speed of light, not even light itself. Now if that doesn't get somebody's attention, then that means they're not engaging their brain. Or, go ahead.
How do we know that?
Well, there's a whole presentation on that too. That's why we have these 50 volumes, that I went through them little by little by little, precept upon precept, concept upon concept. If I didn't know that, I wouldn't be wasting my time. I couldn't care less about your time. But my time is precious to me. Even if it is not, even if it is your time, my time is not precious to you. My time is precious to me. I do not like to waste my time. So yes, I am more mindful of that question, how do we know, than you are. Because to you, you're not losing very much if I'm wrong. I'm losing everything if I'm wrong. So it's me who has to make sure, doubly sure, triply sure, million times sure, that I am not wasting my time. So don't ever think that I'm just acting out of naivete. That's why these 50 volumes, I wanted to point them to you. Not that they prove anything, because none of you can read all those 50 volumes even in a year, I think. But even if you could, I don't think you'll be able to synthesize them or integrate them, because all these things, they look like disparate partitions of the same thing. But my point was that anyone who thinks they can solve the problems in science without solving the problems in religion, or the other way around, anyone, any pope, anybody who thinks they can solve the problems of religion without solving the problems of science, are fooling themselves. And that applies to all religions and all sciences. One of the sad facts I discovered was, and that was again very hard for me to believe, that anywhere from 1/3 to half of all knowledge in all knowledge domains is erroneous. And God knows it, and He did it for a purpose and for our best, question that he was asking. How do we know? This is one other aspect that convinces me that God knows what is best for us. That, making two choices or three. I mean, I wasn't picking up just on two, because God can always open 10 doors for a person like Job or somebody to set which one of the 10 doors He chooses. But for some people, He will just make it simple. Only give 2 doors to walk through. Choose one or the other. One is a little easier than the other. One requires a little sacrifice, the other doesn't. One is a little selfish, the other is more altruistic. All these things, factors are there. So don't underestimate how valuable my time is to me and why I spend so much time on 50 volumes. I've got a whole deal of time invested in those 50 volumes already. Anyway, let's see what else. Where else can we go from here before they announce the other stuff? I don't think there is much after this. I left this thing here so that I can do that universe within universe, FTPR, DN, ABU versus IEVACX, FFU. Maybe next time we get together we'll do that too. There are hundreds of things like this. Any one of them in isolation is sure to convince anyone that I'm a crackpot. But taken all together, integrated together, synthesized together, they make sense. Why don't we make good progress in government or politics? Why? Because we don't make all the corrections at the same time. We elect senators on a different schedule, congressmen on a different schedule, president on a different schedule, and by the time the new batch gets ready, the old batch has corrupted them. And if they haven't corrupted, they leave. They don't even run for election again. And yet you cannot overhaul the government by changing just little pieces here, little pieces there, 1/3 here, 1/3 another year, 1/4 this year, 1/4 4 years from now, and so on. That kind of piecemeal correction doesn't work. And it's the same principle here. The piecemeal correction in science or religion doesn't work either. They either have to work, all to have to be corrected at the same time, and none of them mean anything otherwise. So, I know I get excited. Even my son warns me about not to get excited. In fact, one of the faithful attendees of our meetings has been my heart surgeon. And one time, my heart surgeon and my bishop both were here. I think Ernie knows my bishop. He's now stake president. They were both here, and I started shouting. And my heart surgeon said, "As your surgeon, I would like to advise you that you should not get so excited." I said, "No, I'm not worried, because my bishop is also here." So whatever you can't take care of, my bishop will take care of it. And what my bishop can't take care of, I think you will do surgery on me. Even if not for no other reason than for the $40,000 profit that you make on each surgery. And that was the profit then. I don't know how much the profit is now. So that was Carrie Pasick. So I think John had a comment about Dr. Carrie Pasick about this knowledge. What was it?
Well, just that you made a similar comment once while he was here.
Yeah.
Dr. Pasick said that when he was graduating from medical school, the president of the medical school made the comment that in 10 years' time, it will be known that half of what we taught you here is incorrect. The problem is you don't know which half.
Yeah, he said that. I remember that. And it turns out that it's not just true of medical knowledge, but it's true of all knowledge, including scriptures. And again, it's not because their scriptures are wrong or the science is wrong, because NASA's error, if any, is negligible compared to the accomplishments they have. Same thing with Newton, same thing with Einstein. You know, all their contributions are much greater than their mistakes. And for us to focus only on their mistakes, not on their accomplishments, I think is kind of short-sighted on our part. I think we should be, you know, eternally grateful to their contributions, just purge out the errors and go on with the life. But for 400 years, we haven't purged out the errors, because regardless of what everybody thinks, there are errors even in Newton's work. Newton's work. Who is the God in Britain? Like Einstein is here, you know. Well, Einstein is God of science everywhere, you know. But Newton, for example, made 2 errors in his first law of motion. And of course, in England, of course, I can't even get a foot in the door. And even in America, they say, yeah, Newton made some errors, but this is not one of them. Or Einstein knew those Newton's errors, and he extended the laws of Newton to speeds considerably greater than what we are accustomed to. In other words, speeds approaching 70, 80, 90, even 99% of the speed of C that the Einstein's laws apply, but the Newton's laws break down. But if you apply the 2 corrections to the Newton's first law, then I don't think you need Einstein's correction. But you know, that is such a fundamental thing that, you know, that's not something I can even talk about it without people like Andy, you know, getting all uptight. Not Andy, because Andy is not even British. But I have had the similar discussion and concern and doubt from British.
May I correct the word? I'm not uptight. You simply have provoked my curiosity.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Well, I like that because that sort of ends it as a positive. No, but the way you said, how do we know, and then the way you laughed after it. It's the laughter that made me doubt it. Huh?
I correct you again. It was a chuckle.
Oh, but that's a big deal. Whose side are you on? I thought, Jim, you've been coming here long enough to know me a little bit better. It was a chuckle, not a laughter. Thank you. I'm glad I could be so magnanimous about these observations. But then I wouldn't be approaching OneReality. The fact is, the reason I can even think of OneReality is because I have honed my perception slightly better than what it was a few years ago. And I continue to improve it. In fact, I still believe today that God continues to improve, learn, and increase in intelligence. And people argue with me, they say, well, that's not possible. How can perfect God learn anything now? Well, he does. But the same way as you cannot add anything to infinity. But if you add something to the infinity, it will absorb it. Keep adding more and more and more and more, it'll keep absorbing it. So it is learning, it's growing, it's everything. But nonetheless, the infinity is still the same absolute infinity. It is no less, no greater, no matter how much you add, subtract, divide, multiply, the infinity and the zero never change. And now I'm talking about absolute zero and absolute infinity. I'm not talking about relative zero and relative infinity, because they will change. And when I read a book from a mathematician about zero or about infinity, they don't say it, but I interpret it to mean they're only talking about relative zero and relative infinity. And then they are right. But they don't even recognize that there are 2 such things as relative zero and absolute zero. Relative infinity and absolute infinity. So I know my work is cut out in front of me. Let me see. On my list, so many other things, but I was trying to access the 4 first pages that I want to add. The first one is sound bites. The second one I called OneReality Now. Now means nugget of wisdom. These are basically sound bites, but they're a little longer than a sound bite. They're like a paragraph long. So I call them OneReality Now, OneReality Nugget of Wisdom. This is only good for people who have at least 2 minutes to read it, because most of them are 300 words or so, you know what I mean? And most people can't absorb more than 100 to 150 words a minute. So that's why I call them not sound bites, but nuggets of wisdom. And the third in that series is what I call TPM, which is this probably means. Now, I don't know for sure, but you know, I like to interpret. For example, when I read Genesis 1:1, a lot of people say, well, Bible is not subject to anybody's private interpretation. But I read, to be honest with you, like I say, under TPM, to say that Genesis 1:1 says, in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth, not period, but and everything in it. And unless I read that in, I cannot conform everything to OneReality. And so that's an error, maybe on my part or on parts of others. But the reality is that there are people who interpret the Bible is so literally correct that God made sure that people who were involved in the process didn't have any free agency. They were all robots or zombies. That's what they're saying, that the Bible is not subject to private interpretation. To me, that's not private interpretation. That's implied in there. Either the phrase was God dropped out, or there was some other reason that it wasn't included. But I read that to mean, in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth and everything in it. Okay, and then I go on to Genesis 1, 2, and then on to Genesis 2, which is not, a repeat of what God has done and or going to do. It's like the army slogan. First, I'm going to tell you what I'm going to tell you. Then I'm going to tell you. Then I'm going to tell you what I told you, so that it'll sink in. I don't think God follows that philosophy. I think what God did in Genesis 1:1 is one thing. In the rest of the Genesis 1, what God said he did is a continuation from where he left off at Genesis 1:1. And then in Genesis 2 is not a repeat of Genesis 1, which most Bible believers believe, even those who believe in literal interpretation of the Bible. Even they say that God is just repeating, paraphrasing, synthesizing what he just did in Genesis 1. No, Genesis 2 does not repeat what God did in Genesis 1. It's a continuation. And if you interpret it in any other way, you're missing pieces of the puzzle. If you think you can arrive at OneReality, jigsaw puzzle, that you can solve the jigsaw puzzle of OneReality with only half the pieces, or where the pieces of the puzzle are changing shape constantly, then you don't have a prayer to finish the jigsaw puzzle. But if you cooperate together, sciences and religion get together, put the pieces of their truth together, chances are you can build the entire puzzle from it. So you have to share your pieces of puzzle and knowledge and truth with the other party's pieces of puzzle, knowledge and truth. And the things that don't fit in, throw them out. Don't have undue allegiance to it. I mean, after all, why did Jews reject Jesus?
He's a troublemaker.
Well, that's what science would say about Pope, and Pope would say about science.
Render
But
unto Caesar what is Caesar. That's the fundamental reason he was rejected.
good.
And he was a Jesus come lately.
Who is that? What?
Jesus.
Yeah, that's right. Plus, the concept of Jews of God was nothing like Jesus. Jesus looked more like a man than God. And in Torah, they have already picked up some kind of a concept of what God should look like. And since Jesus didn't look like that, they just tossed him off as a smart human being. Now, will we have the same problem again when at the second coming? I don't think so, because I don't think second coming Jesus is coming as a man. It'll be a lot different. Anyway, that's besides the point, because I need to learn how to talk without bringing these things. I have a very faithful client of mine, Peter Mikan. He's the CEO of CTI Electronics, and I was talking with him. He loves to talk, so we sometimes get together after talking the business. We continue talking a little bit about. He would ask me about this, or I would. So I would ask him, his opinion about this. And he once told me, and this was still. I was still thinking about the organization of the book. In other words, what should go in volume 1, what should go in volume 2? Should I separate corrections to sciences in one volume, corrections to religion in another volume, or stay faithful to me, put corrections to sciences and religion in OneReality, and put all the appendices in volume 2? Because the whole thing wouldn't fit in one volume anyway. So I had already decided I'm going to have to do 2 volumes. So I was discussing this with him about this arrangement of the volume. He gave me an advice. He says, pal, the moment you mention Adam or God or Jesus, you can wish goodbye to your book. It is not going anywhere. It is a kiss of death. It's a journey to hell. So if you're going to talk about those things, make sure you mention never God, never Jesus, never special earth, never geocentric earth, never dozens of these things. Otherwise science will spew you out. And I bet I haven't talked to it, but my bishop or my pope or whoever I consult with in the religious circles would have similar opinions. He says, if you start measuring how true the accomplishments of science are, and how true the Big Bang is, how true the evolution is, how true this quantum physics is, how true epigenetics is, without even understanding what it is, according to their own admission, then I can wish goodbye for all the religions to read my book. In other words, I have to discuss all of science in the vocabulary of the science, and all of religion also in the vocabulary of science. Whereas in the religious volume, I have to discuss all of religion in the vocabulary of religion, but also all of the science in the vocabulary of religion. And I'm getting close to that now. I mean, I've figured out many ways now how to describe soul and spirit in the vocabulary of the particle physicists. In fact, Frank is already working on a graphic for me on that. And fortunately, that one doesn't require 9 degrees of freedom of motion, although I wouldn't be surprised that those motions are there also. I just haven't discovered the reason or why, you know what I mean? Because if the Newton's universal law of gravitation applies at astronomical scales, I would not be surprised that it also applies at nanoscale and to the ultimate bottom of that scale, which goes up to a radius of 10 raised to the power minus 40 meters. Now that's a huge volume. That's a huge playpen. So the man's playpen, in a way, is a sphere that varies from 10 raised to the power minus 40 meters to 10 raised to the power plus 40 meters. And if you convert that into surface area, that's 10 raised to the power 160. And if you convert that into volume, that's 10 raised to the power 240 cubic meters. That's a huge playpen. All for man. Okay. Where are we? What item? Oh, 4th item, of course. Somebody keeps me on track. And the 4th item is about questions. And I call that GMCWHQ. All this stands for question. G means for good. Oh, it's a good question, which means nobody knows the answer to this question, but we like it because you're raising the question. So G stands for good question. Then MC stands for multiple choice questions. You give a question and then you give a dozen answers, all multiple choice, and what the person creator of the thing is saying, I haven't got the foggiest idea which answer is right. But it is a multiple choice question, so you take it and you play with it. So good question that there is no answer. Multiple choice question that there is no right answer to it. And then there is what they call WHQ, which is the open-ended questions. These are questions to make you think. And there are, again, no two answers will ever agree, and yet they would all be correct. I mean, even contradictory answers would be considered correct because of the perspectives and stuff like that. And WHQ, if you don't already know, I am sure Lucille probably knows it because she came from the journalism background a little bit. It stands for what, where, when, why, who, and how. That's 5 W's and 1 H. What, where, when, why, who, and how. And if you begin a question with these 5 question marks, then it means you're looking for an answer, an essay. It's not a multiple choice answer. It's a subjective answer. It's not a binary answer of yes or no. Things like that. So those are the 4. And these, I intend to put 1 page on each almost, immediately, as soon as I can get enough time, on my word processor and stuff like that. Because I already have notes in these 50 volumes scattered all over. But I just want to put, 15, 20 examples of each so that you get a better idea of what really soundbite is. Just me then saying, oh, there is no such thing as random. Not even a random number generator. I mean, the reason random number generator works is because it follows a law of probability. If it didn't, it wouldn't. So a random number generator is not random. It's following a law to give you the random number so that the predictability of the probability theory will apply. Many, many, many things like this. Like I say, nothing travels at the speed of light, not even light. Or who was that scientist who said about uncertainty principle? Heisenberg, was it? Yeah. The uncertainty principle itself is uncertain. Now that's a soundbite. It's short. It's a phrase or a one sentence at the most. It doesn't need to be expanded. I mean, it can be expanded into one reality nugget of wisdom also. But as a soundbite, it's enough to get somebody's attention. Say, what kind of crackpot is he? And I don't mind getting attention like that as long as I feel confident that after my death they will come to that realization someday that crackpot was right after all. And I'm not worried about that I cannot convince anybody today. That's not even my goal. My goal is to leave a paper trail, which, as Raman showed you, I have already started. But I need to make it in such a cogent way that it has a better chance of survival 3, 5, 10 generations from now. Who knows what?